to start with a story this week. I have to laugh a little bit. See, one of my cohorts, Bob, and me and Jerry, we were all cohorts in our absolutely crazy, stupid, idiotic, foolish days, and we went down so many paths. And one of the paths was Jerry. He wanted to go out to California and score some pot. So Jerry went out to California and scored some pot. I think like 20 pounds of it, you know. He came back. It wasn't very good, to be honest. And all the wrappers for those bricks were in my van. And my mom, when I was having lunch over there one day, said, I'm going to go clean out Mike's van. And so she went to clean out my van, and there were all these wrappers. And she said, what are all those wrappers for? And I said, oh, Jerry just flew out to California and bought 20 pounds of pot. And the red ones are the good pot, and the blue ones were the okay pot. And she just didn't know what to do, because I was an honest kid. I was always trying to tell her the truth of what I was doing. So she ends up going to a psychiatrist because she doesn't know what to do with me. She's just at wit's end. And halfway through the thing, the psychiatrist says, what you need to do, it's tough love. You need to change your locks, and you need to just put him out. My mom, she said, I stood up and I walked to the wall where his degree was, and I looked at it, and I turned around and I said, you might know a whole lot about the mind, but you don't know squat about love. And she left. So you know what my mom did? And Bob, you're a recipient of this. My mom called up and she said, how many people are over at your place tonight? And there were always a ton of people. We were always smoking dope and shit, you know. So I said, there's 9 of us here. She said, in an hour, come over for dinner. So in an hour, we all show up at my parents' house for dinner. She has put the leaf in the dining room table, has her best china out, Waterford crystal, and my mom and my dad waited on us as if we were royalty. And every 2 weeks, my mom or my dad would call up and say, how many people are there? And I'd tell her, and she'd say, one time there were 12 of us. Just come on over in an hour and we'll feed you. Same thing. Treated us like royalty. Now, I have to say that was grace to me. And I wonder sometimes, how the hell did I ever become a minister? And then I look at stuff like that and I go, wow, grace. My parents had a lot of it. And believe me, I got my family of origin problems. Don't get me wrong. But I'm sitting here in my studio filled with instruments and recording equipment. I'm sitting here Zooming with 2 friends who I value so much. I have 3 meals a day. I have a roof over my head. I have warmth in the cold, cool when it's hot. My parents helped me through college and grad school. All of that for me, grace. I did nothing. I did not do one thing to deserve any of that. Any that makes me worthy of it. It was all gift. And if you look up the meaning of grace and the way I'm talking about it, it's called unmerited gift of divine favor. And I don't know about the divine, but it surely was favor. See, I was born into it, and I think most Westerners are. And there's other ways of talking about grace. And I'm not talking about a prayer before a meal or this quality of being pleasant and polite or a willingness to be fair and honest. Those are all good things. But I want to talk about grace as gift. What is this grace? What is it? I am going to suggest that grace creates an opening. An opening to what? An opening to new possibilities that offer more life, more goodness, more wholeness. Possibilities, not the reality of it, just the possibilities. Now, for those of you who've ever sung John Newton's Amazing Grace, one of the lines that I really never liked my kids singing when we sang this choir was the word wretch. Amazing grace, how great the sound that saved a wretch like me. Well, if you knew John Newton's story, see, he was a captain of a slave ship, and he was going to Africa, rounding up, the slaves and then taking them back. And one day he had just picked up all these slaves, and I think he was reading Aquinas, if I'm correct, but I could be wrong on that. And something happening, the opening happened. And in that moment, he not only wrote Amazing Grace, but he turned the ship around and let all the slaves go, and he was done. His career was over. That's grace. What is that opening? I'm going to suggest that our listeners, my listeners are probably listening due to grace. All the many gifts along the way that allowed you to make the choices, that created the openings that could tune you in this way or that one. Grace as an opening that is worthy of our paying attention. So that's a whole lot to lay down there on the first thing. I'm going to open with Mary Ann first. Mary Ann, what do you say about this grace?
Well, I have mixed feelings about grace in the way. Because it seems to imply blessings, or it seems to imply, and although it is given without any, it's given freely and it's available to all. I truly believe that. And yet it's something that I think we can really get diverted if we start to think of it as always something that is beneficial, or something that is it is always beneficial. I'm stumbling here a little bit because I do have very mixed feelings about this whole concept of where it comes from, how it's given, how there is still suffering in the world if grace is freely given and it's available to all. What is it that motivates us as people to recognize that there is some kind of a support or light or something that can fuel us forward to give us the ability to take action, to alleviate suffering, to be able to navigate the world, to be able to do things. I can't view it as a gift. I view it more as a force that is available to help us in any and every situation that we may find ourselves in. Because I found myself in some very challenging situations where was grace being withheld because of these challenging situations, or was grace right there alongside of these or a part of these challenging situations? And I think of all the people that struggle in this world who may not have a roof over their head, may not have, and it's hard to think of grace as something that is providing you comfort. I think it's something that provides you hope, and it provides you connection, and it provides you with and I love that you called it an opening, and it provides you an opening to be able to see the world in a different way.
Amen. So. And I think that's the best we can have for. And I will say we're going to entertain some ideas. I'm going to let Bob have his say, but I don't want to confuse blessings with good fortune. I don't see my life as having been blessed. As Jesus said, the blessed ones are those without. They're the ones grieving. They're people having a hard time. So, but I think grace can create an opening that allows us to do something with our good fortune or even our bad fortune. And I think that's the piece to me in some of the worst times of my life, like when my mom died. I experienced some light with her, and it seemed gracious to me. So I think those are important distinctions. And to always remain suspicious. because that's my mind. Bob, what do you have to say?
Well, this is kind of a tough one for me because I kind of come down in the middle between the two of you. My life has been incredibly filled with grace, although I wasn't really aware of it as it was happening. I've had a truly, I'm going to use the word blessed, but because I don't have to listen to what you say. No, I think my life has been truly blessed. I've had some hard times, but they haven't been that hard. For the most part, I have had the kind of life that most people would really aspire to. Now, I'm not famous, I'm not rich or anything like that, but I've always been comfortable. I've always had good friends. I've always avoided most sicknesses and things like that. I've had a good job. I've been able to retire and so forth. So my whole life seems like it's been graced. And I feel like, one of my personal characteristics is I have kind of a flat affect curve. By that I mean I don't go to extremes of high joy and low despair. I'm kind of in the middle, and I've said it many times on these podcasts that balance. Trying to find the point between the extremes. And I think that's the reason I gravitate toward that is because my life has been sort of balanced between the extremes. And in that sense, I can't point to this event or that event or whatever as being an example of receiving grace. But when I look back across my whole life, I feel like my whole life has been receiving grace. And if I could just say in the last, say, 5 years, becoming a part of the deep end, I really feel like that has been a real gift of grace, because it's allowed me at this time in my life when, I've said it before, most people don't want to discuss the kind of things we discuss here. And it's been a void. And having the ability to come with the two of you and discuss topics from the deep end has really made this point in my life much more full of grace. So the other real quick point is that it also depends upon what you do with it, how you internalize it, how you move forward after whatever event has brought it to you.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, and I think that last point is a really good one because, John Newton could have received the grace and done nothing. And if grace doesn't move, if the opening doesn't let in something that allows you to be transformed in such a way, then it seems to me that, and I think those openings are happening all over the place. We just don't see them. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
Well, I was going to say, I think of grace as spiritual versus physical, that it's a spiritual thing that happens, and what we do with it is we make it into a physical act. And so that's, I think, Bob, you said you look at, I've had a tremendous amount of grace in my life, tremendous amount. I would not be sitting right here right now if I hadn't. And I think the idea of if we have eyes to see it, that whole concept. And that's where if we can just start to look at life and the world with a different lens, with a different perspective, we'll see that grace is freely given and available to all.
Yeah.
Even despite these physical challenges.
And we're gonna talk about how we engender some faith, but I want to bring up a couple things that are just, I love. I don't know if you guys know Tillich, but his definition of grace, and I love this, as accepting the fact that we are accepted despite the fact that we seem so unacceptable. And I think that that's a really good way of talking about it. Some other ways that I've thought about grace is the gods of random sync. You know, someone said, I think Einstein said, God doesn't play dice with the universe. And I go, no, the universe plays dice. God is the house. And the gods of random sync are creating these openings all over the place. And we can hit a big run of those openings and experience some amazing things. You know, and this is where empathy comes in. Remember the whole concept of semi-permeability? That's a whole piece of this. It also, another way of thinking about it, Don Juan's Castaneda, cubic centimeter of chance. You have to create your awareness, and I think this is what you were talking about, Marianne, that we start seeing it when it pops out, and we take advantage of it. We do something with it. It creates a little opening in the dark where some light can come in, and again, give us some different ways of looking at things. And I'll entertain the thought that you've talked about with blessing, because blessings is I rarely see myself as blessed. I see myself as having a lot of good fortune. And as I talked about Westerners, most of us are living in grace to a large extent. But I think about North Korea. I saw a special on North Korea and what they have to do to escape there, which is basically they don't go to South Korea. They go up into China and then back and around to Thailand. And China is trying to stop them too. It's just the most amazing thing for me to think of people who have little access to these openings, if you will. However, I think that we can help create these openings. And there are ways to do that. There's a great site I found. It's called the Mom Forum. I think it's really fun. But what she says in this, to practice grace, you start with yourself. You start accepting yourself. You start treating yourself with kindness and goodwill. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing, learn to let go. You know, the boogeyman stuff that your soul is full of and haunted by, I think Ram Dass said, you know, have them into tea, and eventually they'll become little schmoes. Let go of that stuff. Practice gratitude. You know, be thankful. Forgive. Because I want you to know, when you learn to forgive others, that forgiveness starts bending itself around on yourself. And that allows you to create more openings. Apologize. Now, I have to say, I've learned that no matter how bad crow is, it's better warm than cold. So when I screw up, I just try to get over it. Hey, I screwed up, you know. Apologize. Accepting responsibility for your actions. Another thing, be mindful. We've talked about this. Attention, attention, attention. The three biggies in Buddhism. Pay attention to where we are without judgment. Watch it. I've spoken about when I was in New York, I was on a bus and there was a guy pissing on a corner, and I looked across, and the guy, it turns out he's a Rinpoche or something, but I didn't know. And I said, look at that, tell me we're not going to hell in a handbasket. And he looked out and he went, or maybe it's just a man urinating on the corner. You know, how do we see things without all the filters of judgment? Another thing, speak kindly. You can catch more bees with honey than vinegar, they say. Well, welcome to it. Another, have compassion. You never know what someone's going through. Seek to have compassion. Another, accept people for who they are. People are who they are, and there's not a damn thing you can do to force them to be somebody else. Just accept them and live with it. And the last one, and I think this is a big one, especially growing old, have a sense of humor. My God, I cannot imagine growing old and all this crap that's coming from the inside now and not having a sense of humor. I believe we can practice this grace, that we can not just experience it, but we can offer it to the world. And I think that that's part of what goodness is about. That's part of what justice is about. That's part of all the things we've talked to are about. When I step outside, and I've said this before, my prayers are always about the Holy Gracious One. You know, I live on the edge of wilderness, and it's wetlands, and there's so much wildlife. And I just cannot believe how integral and how amazing the way everything fits, and that I get to fit into it. I just, to me, it's the Holy Gracious One. And I think that that's part of the journey. And this is the Rumpelstiltskin circuit. How do we turn dross, the everyday pains and stuff, into gold, into something of value that we can use within the context of our being in such a way that we grow from it and grow towards the light? That was a heck of a babble. My friends, what say you? They're quiet. They're silent. Oh, my God.
Well, we're contemplating what you said. Yeah.
It's hard to argue with any of those points. I mean, they all come together to form a pattern of, I don't know, how to be open, how to exist, but more than just existing. And it's something I think we can all strive toward. Every one of them is a very cogent point.
And it points us to how to live in a state of grace, right? It points us to how do we do this? It's very practical terms on. It's not just this ethereal concept. It's very practical things that we can do to foster that.
Yeah.
And how do we move from a random kind of model to a model of oscillation? And when I say that, I mean, instead of just it coming hitherto whenever as the wind blows, that we create something in us that allows it to oscillate more and more through us in a way that creates its own pattern. And I think this is what holy people are doing. They've created an energy loop, if you will, that allows them to oscillate in and out of this opening. And through that opening, they are allowed to, and we are allowed to, receive something new in terms of our view of possibilities. This is what happened with John Newton. I don't know if you've seen the Sergeant York story. He was a drunk, rowdy dude. He was out one night. It was raining. He was trying to get home, I think. He was walking because he couldn't, I don't think his horse was there. I can't remember exactly. But he was wandering, and he tripped on a root. And if he hadn't tripped on the root, he would have stepped off a cliff. And that opening, that random possibility, created in him something new, a whole new way of seeing his life. He went back to the church and started singing. He became a war hero because he didn't like killing. Over and over, we see how grace can disrupt and reinterpret our life in such a way that we bear less malice towards the world. We see the world less as an adversary and more as a partner. We see reality that, things come and they go, and we're in that loop. And how do we deal with that? I think all of those things are very, very important for us to participate. And I think, Marianne, one of you talked about, how do we become an instrument of this grace? How do we allow it? And I think these 10 things are pretty helpful from the Mom Forum. And I don't know about you, but my mom was a forum. I got a freaking saying for everything in the whole universe, from don't cut off your nose to spite your face to wake up. I still hear my mom in the morning going, wake up. And it's not just about waking up in the morning. It's about waking up every day. Waking up to this reality that's oscillating in and out of my being. And I believe it is gift. And I know that you all might have a little bit of a different take on that. But I can't go outside. And maybe my COPD has made a breathing and a breath more valuable. But it's very difficult for me to go outside and not take a breath. and feel totally inside this grace as gift. Like I didn't do anything to deserve to be here. I walk outside and there's a covey of quail that flutters off, and it's just, to me, I did nothing. It feels like a gift to me. And I'll be honest, you two being here, it feels like a gift to me. And I just want more of it. I think that part of what we're doing and talking about these things that have to do with life, being, and consciousness, and how we steer ourselves through this mystery in such a way that it creates goodness, it creates more of health and wholeness. I think that is a challenge, and it's one that we share with Jacob. We're wrestling with God. We are confounded, confused, and wrestling. Marianne?
Well, I was just going to say, and to both of your points about us being able to come together once a week and do this, I think we do need our mighty companions, and I think that's what we are, right? We are companioning as we try to figure out this craziness. So,
yeah, Don Juan called them allies.
Oh,
Yeah,
allies.
there you go.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, we're coming to the end of our time. So, Bob, final comments?
Okay, real quick, I always bring everything back to Carl Jung. He coined the term synchronicity. And I think he was kind of getting at what we've been toying with today in terms of grace. And that's when things just seem to line up in the universe along your path that are beyond simple coincidence and turn into meaningful coincidence. And he was so sure that this was an important concept that he envisioned it as one of the forces of the universe, as much a force of the universe as gravity or time or space or whatever. And I think he was really onto something there, because the more you open yourselves to synchronicity, the more synchronistic things happen to you. And I think that's true with grace also. The more you open to grace, the more you are graced. I don't know if that's the right term, but I think something's real here. Something we may not understand at all. We may not know exactly how to accept it or how to deal with it, but it's real. It's a force
Amen.
of the universe.
Amen. And, to me, we didn't know about gravity, but we were still throwing rocks and shooting arrows. And I think we know that whatever that was allowing that to happen, the force, all of those calculus equations, that was, you don't need to understand it to see it at play and participate in it. And I think I like the idea of engendering this grace. Marianne, final comments?
Yeah, and I was just going to that's an excellent way to end this, but I think just our awareness of this and noticing. So even like with the synchronicity, these things I think are happening all the time, but we may or may not be able to see them. And so fostering our intention, our awareness, and intentionally live our lives to look for these things, because we will find what we look for. So Let's
Amen.
look for grace.
And I think, both of you put your finger on something. Living it intentionally creates more of what it is that you're living intentionally. And I think that that's a really important piece to kind of understand. Now, where do we go next after all this? Now, I will have to say that I've been watching Life on Our Planet with my grandson, and we've been learning. And there's 3 rules of life, and that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to talk about the 3 rules of life. This has been going on since, the first life happened. These 3 rules apply. And I made my grandson memorize them, by the way. The first rule of life is those that adapt win through. In other words, adaptation, if we really look at it, is the key to wisdom. The second rule of life is competition drives evolution. Sometimes I go, I would wish we were more cooperative and less competitive, and yet it's the very competitiveness that seems to drive us into the next piece. The unfortunate piece of this is war is the place where the greatest conflict and competition is, and that's one of the most creative times in human life. And what's the fourth one? The third one? The third one is the earth will never stay the same. It is always changing, and we've got to apply the other two to the changing earth. My friends, my lovely friends, I have to say, you guys feel like spirit partners in many ways. So until our next time together next week, when we talk about the 3 rules of life, God's peace, God's love, and may the grace and the openings change your life.